He was the kind of mini Tyson of his day, promoter Don Frazier said. He was very strong, an all-action guy, always in your face, never stopped punching. He was a superbly conditioned fighter. Harada was like a little toy. When the bell rang, he came out of his corner and he threw non-stop punches until the bell rang again. Masahiko Harada was born on April 5, 1943, in a small fishing village on the coast of Japan. His father worked as a landscaper, instilling discipline and a fighting spirit in Harada as the family struggled through post-World War II poverty. My father told me when I was young that there were 3 paths to success, Harada said: to go to school and study hard, to create a successful business of some kind, or to achieve a great victory in some activity. And he was talking about boxing. Harada would begin boxing at the age of 14 and turn pro at the age of 16, winning his debut by 4th-round knockout. His younger brother, Katsuhiro, would follow him into the sport, taking on many notables of the time period as well. Harada would be managed by Takeshi Sasaki and trained by Yoshihiro Sasaki. He would live in manager Takeshi's large estate, which housed 25 other fighters. Strict rules were given. No girls, no sake, and fighters were always to obey Takeshi's orders. Harada would rise at 6 a.m., run for 7 miles, train, eat, then sleep. Soon he would be the #1 fighter in the house, living on the top floor after defeating Hiroyuki Ebihara, Ray Perez, and Baby Espinoza. After opening his career with 25 consecutive victories, Harada would lose a split decision to veteran Edmundo Esparza in June of 1961. But promoters of the flyweight champion Pone Kingpech were looking for an easy title defense, and they chose the then little-known Fighting Harada. Harada was at first labeled an unworthy challenger by the World Boxing Association, and they stated that they would not recognize the match as a legitimate title defense. The WBA would change its stance and recognize the bout as an official defense only if Harada won. Harada would force the action from round 1, pressing Kingpech relentlessly. Kingpech would suffer a cut over his left eye in the 5th, and by the 11th, Harada would go in for the kill. The victory would be voted the upset of the year. 3 months later, Harada would rematch Kingpech in the former champion's native Thailand. As Harada entered the ring, the crowd would block his passage down the aisle, delaying him 30 minutes before he could reach the ring. Once there, Harada demanded 15 minutes of rest, and once the bout started, he would once again take the early lead. But by the 8th round, Kingpech's jabs and uppercuts began scoring with regularity. Kingpech smothered Harada's inside attack and hung on to win a very close decision. Harada would rise up to the Bantamweight division, and 8 months later, he would face Mexico's power-hitting Jose Medel. Harada only knew 2 words of English, "Rucky punch," which is what he used to describe what happened to him in the Medell fight. Undeterred by the loss, he would go on a 7-fight win streak, coming to LA to defeat Rey Assis before stopping Katsutoshi Aoki in 3 rounds. Harada would then challenge Eder Joffrey for his Bantamweight title. Harada would be the heavy underdog as Joffrey was 47-0, had made 8 title defenses, all by knockout, with his last 17 also by knockout. But Harada would not be intimidated. He would take charge halfway through the fight, once again scoring the upset of the year. His popularity was now riding high off of Japan's post-Tokyo Olympics patriotic surge. More than 60% of Japanese television sets had tuned in for the Joffrey fight, surpassing the numbers set during the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo. But one of Harada's weaknesses was that he would blow up in weight between bouts. Harada would balloon up to 150 pounds and was forced to go on a crash diet for 3 months before taking on the highly ranked Alan Rudkin of Liverpool. Harada's trainer feared that the weight loss would be too much, but Harada looked like his usual highly conditioned self. After successfully defending his title, Harada would grant Eder Joffrey a rematch. Critics wrote off his first fight victory as a fluke, but Harada would prove to be Joffrey's better once again, winning a unanimous decision. Over a year later, he would face his one-time conqueror Jose Medell and gain revenge with a decision win. His popularity in Japan now at an all-time high, Harada would record a single called Boxing Kota. Slick Colombian Bernardo Caraballo would challenge Harada in July of 1967, and Harada would win a decision. But on February 27, 1968, Harada would lose his title to Lionel Rose in Tokyo. Once again, he had trouble making the weight, and would not display his usual aggressiveness during the bout with Rose. It became apparent that shrinking down to the bantamweight class had become harder as he aged. He would move up to the featherweight division, defeating veterans like Dwight Hawkins and Nobuo Chibo, before being narrowly outpointed by the 5'10" American Alton Coulter. Now considered past his prime, Harada would be handpicked to face newly crowned featherweight champion Johnny Famechon in his first defense. Harada would travel to Famechon's native Australia, promising to show fans his Yamato Tomashi, Japanese for fighting spirit. But upon his arrival, Harada would become angry when the food he brought with him was impounded. Entering the ring as a 2-1 underdog, Harada received a letter from the head of the Japanese Boxing Commission before the fight began. It read, quote, "Uphold prestige," anticipating brilliant performance. Harada would floor Famechon in the second, get knocked down himself in the fifth, drop Famechon in the 11th, but it was ruled a slip. He would then floor Famechon in the 14th round. Even the hometown crowd expected the decision to be in Harada's favor. But there was only one judge, former featherweight champion turned referee, Willie Pep. He scored the fight a draw, but then an error was found on the card which gave the bout to Famechon. Pep's card had a number of penciled corrections and then was inspected by police and promoters before recalling Famechon to the ring and having him declared the winner. I was clearly superior to him during the match, Harada said. Such a stupid judgment should not have been made. Fans and reporters also knew a robbery when they saw one. I have never been to Hartford, Connecticut, Willie Pep's hometown, columnist Mike Gibson wrote. But I did a bit of checking, and it is the home of the American School for the Deaf, the Connecticut Institute for the Blind, and the Institute of Living for the Mentally Unwell. Willie Pep is extremely well placed and ought to run for mayor. Pep's only reply was, quote, "I made an honest mistake." 6 months later, the rematch would take place in Tokyo. I felt sure I was going to win, Harada said, but Famechon was determined to succeed coming into my hometown. His fighting spirit was better than mine. The following day, Harada would announce his retirement from the ring. He was only 26 years old at the time and never came back to the sport. He would become a trainer and search for Japan's next great boxer, the next Fighting Harada, with no success. He blamed the lack of great fighters on the country's newfound prosperity and economic diversity. When I started boxing in the late 1950s, Japan was a poor country, Harada said. No one owned much of anything. Now, look around. It's a rich, wealthy country. We all began to notice the difference after the 1964 Olympics, when we began to become more prosperous. But as we became richer, we lost a certain spirit, the spirit that I had, and the men who boxed when I did. Harada would do well out of the ring, owning the Kawasaki Boxing Gym, becoming chairman of the Japanese Boxing Association, as well as becoming a television commentator. He would often express disappointment in Japanese fighters and felt that their hungry spirit was lacking. Nowadays, if someone gets knocked down, they don't bother getting up. I never had that attitude, and neither did my opponents. The fighting spirit was most important. In 2004, Harada would suffer a brain hemorrhage which required a hospital stay. He would recover, and by 2019, he would present the Muhammad Ali Trophy to Naoya Inoue after he won the World Boxing Super Series in the Bantamweight division, the torch finally being passed to the next great Japanese boxer.